Hello. Hiya.
Hello.
Welcome. It's the old
Welcome.
Sodcast, number 3. Thank you if you're watching us on the replay, and hopefully we might get some people in live joining us in the chat in a few moments' time, but we'll see. So I'm joined, as always, by my elegant... Why did elegant come to mind? Elegant co-host, Jason Clow. Not suitable for... I don't describe anyone as elegant, and yet that was, for some reason, this just goes to know how crap my brain works. So that was the first word that came to mind.
Maybe eloquent.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say that about you either. Certainly not elegant. Bloody hell. Richard McCook is in. Hi, Jimmy and Jason. Hi, Richard. Thanks for coming in, mate. Nice to see you. I think it'll be a fun one tonight. I've done no preparation for it because I'm just going to rant for a couple. Well, I'll try not to rant too harshly, but hopefully we can get some interesting debate going in the chat as well. You had a good week, Jason?
Yeah, not bad. A little bit lazy, but a few good things organised, and just bits and pieces. So yeah, not bad.
Okay, good. Just a reminder for those who don't know, which can't be many people, but it is Eurovision next Saturday, and for the first time ever on this YouTube channel, I'll be doing a Eurovision special, or we'll be doing it, as it will be under the old Sodcast umbrella. Jason and I will be on the panel. The stream will start at 7:45 UK time, which is about 15 minutes before Eurovision will go live around the world anyway. So hope you can join us for that in 6 days' time. It should be a lot of fun. It's not going to be like these normal old Sodcasts because, we like to discuss things in these, but it's a watch along and we're just going to have a laugh, have some reactions. Jason might open his booze cabinet that evening, so
we'll see.
And then dust it down and everything. So it'll be a lot of fun. And the actual Eurovision itself, the show from Liverpool, you will be able to see it within this stream. So if you haven't got access to TV or some device to watch it on, don't worry, because just get onto YouTube, get onto this channel, and you'll be able to watch it with us there in the corner, just laughing at how camp everything is.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Eurovision special next Saturday, but enough about that. That's not yet. Today we've got something to talk about. We've got our overrated bands and artists to discuss and to probably slag off.
Well, yeah.
Look, Tel Talks, evening, gents. We've not got fancy Eurovision outfits for next week. No.
Can't be asked for that.
I've not got a fancy outfit for any occasion, let alone Eurovision. But I hope you'll be able to join us for that, Tel, and anyone else who might be watching on the replay. Please come in. And something I forgot to mention about that, by the way. Sorry, I'm going back on myself here. But the invitation to have panelists will be open next Saturday as well. Would love as many people who want to join us up here on the panel, as it were. And you can stay for as little or as long as you want, really. So, let's carry on. But today, overrated bands and artists is what we're talking about. Now, me and Jason, we've not struggled because, I instantly thought of who I want to mention first within a second. And I'm sure Jason has had some easy picks, but it's this sort of determination of like, what's the difference between a band and an artist who we just generally hate, or a band / artist who is overrated by maybe the music press, by their own fans, by the media, etc., etc. So, yeah, Jason. I mean, how before I ask you about your first, the first one you're going to mention, how did you find this topic really when you were thinking about it over the
Um,
past couple?
it's well again, it's yes, there is a difference between the two, but sometimes you have to think: is it because of the marketing? Is it because of the music? What is it about them that classes as being overrated?
Mm,
Um, it was quite difficult trying to think because I think most of the people that I'm going to mention I do like to some degree. So
yeah.
it was trying to be fair and not just because it's a particular style or whatever I don't like. But
Mm.
it was quite. I did find it quite tricky.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But I think sort of, once you get going, once you mention your first one, you'll find numerous reasons to sort of, well, they're overrated because. But then,
Yeah,
I do want to encourage us both, and I'm talking about
yeah,
myself, maybe even more so than you, because I could get on my soapbox pretty easily, really, over a lot of
yeah,
people. But I'm trying to encourage us to look at whatever positives that we may be able to glean. We might not be able to glean many, if any, depending on who we talk about. But
yeah.
enough preamble. I'll let you go first, Jason. I want you. By the way, everybody, we've not discussed who we've picked beforehand,
No,
so I don't.
no.
I don't know who Jason's going to talk about. There was one. There was
Right.
one solo artist he mentioned who I don't know if he'll bring him up, but I said, well, if you
I
hate him,
may leave that. Yeah,
yeah,
I
then
may leave that.
yeah.
Anyway,
But
so
Jason,
okay,
who was your first
right.
choice for an overrated band or artist?
This is probably going to aggravate the crap out of you,
Oh, right. I might know
right?
it's gonna,
But
pick one of my bloody
but
favourites right away.
yeah,
Isn't it?
but right. I know I do like the band. Don't get me wrong. I do like the band. I think they've done some very
Okay.
good stuff. But I think they were overhyped. They believed their own hype too much, and that is Oasis.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were overrated. And the reason
Right.
I say that is because there were other Britpop bands that I think were just as good, if not better, that didn't get the attention that they deserved. Not really. I mean, it always came down, because when you break it down, it came back down to the big two, didn't it? Really, it came down to primarily Oasis and Blur. That's what
Mm.
everyone remembers. And they're saying, "Oh, we're bigger than God," and all this malarkey. And it's like, yeah, but are you really that good?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
No.
um,
Um. You know what? I'm an Oasis fan. I've made no secret about that, but I
yeah,
do understand where you're coming from, and to a large extent, I agree with you. But
yeah.
you carry on. With
Yeah.
whatever explanation and examples that you want to
Okay.
that you want.
Well,
But as I'm sitting here, yeah, I like Oasis generally,
yeah.
with certain exceptions. I wasn't going to pick them for this, but
No,
the
no.
fact that you have, I do get it. I know why
Yeah.
I know why you chose them.
Well, I think for starters anyway, when it comes down to it, and a lot of people may disagree with me with this, I always thought Noel was the more talented of the two.
Well,
Right?
it was the chief songwriter for
Yeah. I
the
also
first
I also think he's got a better
four
voice.
albums. It's
Make of that what
different,
you will.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. No, but they were they were full of themselves. They were like, oh, we're the be all and end all, bloody bloody blah. Um, I think they were trying to make out they were bigger than the Beatles. And it's like,
Yeah,
no, sorry, you're not, right? Are
a
they
lot
good?
of that I think, really was just a bit. It was just kind of like a kind of naive arrogance, really. Just sort of,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, maybe.
if we say we're the next Beatles, then if we say it often enough, that means it's got to be true, kind of thing. Whereas
Yeah,
when you look back at especially more contemporary interviews with Noel, certainly, and I think even Liam to an extent. I think they'll be the first to hold their hands up and say, "Oh, didn't we half talk a load of bollocks back 25 years ago? We were just, it was almost like they're on a bit of a wind up, really." But it was a different time, really, weren't it?
I suppose.
I think we may get round to discussing the trials and tribulations of Britpop one day in the future on here, but so no doubt Oasis will come up again.
But I preferred things like Pulp. I thought Pulp were better, right? I thought they did a more for what the oldest impression I got of Britpop in itself was it was supposed to be this 60s tinged influence to it, but they put like their own modern twist on it, if that makes sense. So you definitely had the influences from other bands of an earlier period in there. And I just felt Blur were better not Blur, Pulp were better songwriters. Then more stuff I like
both. I was a big Pulp fan, particularly when I was younger. Big Oasis fan, particularly during what I would call their peak years. But I don't find them particularly comparable to one another as groups, really. Yeah, they were both lumped in that Britpop genre, but I'm reluctant to even call Britpop a genre because it was more of it was like a media created.
That is true. Yeah.
It was like it was like Coca-Cola or Microsoft. It was more like a branding than anything, brand. That's what it was to me, rather than any one specific sound, really.
But then
that sounded similar. Like if I suppose Oasis, I would probably compare them more to. I think Shed 7 took after Oasis a little bit. This is stuff that we probably ought to say for when we do a Britpop special, mate.
Yeah, but, I'm just saying anyway.
Oasis, you find that Jarvis Cocker was a better songwriter than Noel Gallagher. It was certainly more of an intelligent, kind of cerebral songwriter.
Maybe
Jarvis
that's it.
Wrote amazing lyrics, and some of them were quite autobiographical as well about. The lyrics to Common People, that remains one of the best written pop songs probably of all time, and that's before you even play the thing. You can just look at the lyrics and realise how great it is. Whereas Oasis, Noel was basically channeling John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and a lot of his stuff was a bit nonsensical, but then you can go back from then 30 years, now 50 odd years, and a lot of Beatles lyrics make no sense.
They did make a lot of sense. No, I agree with you. No, there was one band. Well, I mean, this is something again we're talking about with Britpop, and you may want to look at them because I know I've mentioned them a couple of times. But that was Airhead, formerly known as Jefferson Airhead. They had to change the name for obvious reasons. But I think they were a band that should have done better than they did, and they only ever did the one album.
Yeah, but I mean,
because they got overlooked.
Well, keeping it with Oasis, I mean, there would have been loads of bands who overlooked.
But I think that's what I'm saying. Is that I was just going to say, right, and I'll leave it at that. Is the reason I felt that way is because there was because of Oasis was so in your face. The other bands didn't perhaps get the look in that they should have got.
Yeah, whose fault was it though? They were all. I mean,
I don't know.
It's a little bit of a kind of not vicious circle, but the other one that kind of means similar. Like the press were feeding off Oasis, and then the Gallagher brothers, to be more precise, and the Gallaghers were feeding off the press, and it was this sort of never-ending cycle of let's say something outrageous. There was Noel Gallagher saying, "Oh, taking drugs is fine. Everyone does it. It should be legalized," which is an opinion. I'm not going to get into that, but it was obvious. It was obviously an opinion that the tabloid was going to pick up on, and then be absolutely outraged by. But there was outrage for other
Oh,
Britpop
yeah, no
bands.
doubt.
But
Yeah.
the thing is, the outrage is what sells the newspapers. It's what sells the tabloids.
Unfortunately, yeah.
No one buys the Sun newspaper to read about the Hong Kong Stock Exchange or
No, exactly.
even domestic policy in the state of Arkansas, do they? They read it because they want to see
Yeah.
tits on page 3. They want to read about 7 pages worth of football in the back, and then they want a load of celebrity gossip and tittle tattle in the rest of it. So while it's easy for a tabloid to feign outrage about Liam Gallagher calling people wankers or Noel Gallagher talking about drugs or whatever, but that is what's selling these papers. So they needed Oasis, they needed the Gallagher brothers to still be doing that.
That's fair.
So
okay, anyway, that's all I was going to say about that.
Well, no, I mean, I'm still interested in, like your specific thoughts on Oasis. Like, I mean, for me, I don't even know if you can call it overrated because I don't think the later albums really got particularly, unanimous praise anyway.
No,
but,
it's true.
For me, the magic was over after Be Here Now, really. I mean, for some people, it would have been when Be Here Now came out. I actually, and I know I'm in a minority, I actually like that album. Yeah, it does sound like it's just 5 lads taking too much cocaine, but there's some good songs on it. And the follow-up albums, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, that's one, I never liked it when I first got it. But I've grown to like that album more in recent years.
I think,
it's so my tastes have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But after
think that happens anyway. Yeah, I think that happens anyway. I probably, and it's going to sound weird considering what I've said, but I probably am more fond of Oasis now than I was when they originally came out. If you take the albums at face value, do you know what I mean? Rather than the hype, you just take it as an album, listen to it as an album, forget who it's by, if you will, and just listen to them as an album. And it's like, there's some good solid stuff on there.
Yeah.
I'm almost contradicting myself, but
No. I mean, this is these aren't necessarily or exclusively bands and artists we just hate and dislike and despise across the board for any rational or irrational reason. These are artists who we recognize their musicianship at least, and we know that they've got a fan base and and people love them, but for whatever reason we think they're a bit overhyped and overrated. So my first pick, I'm going to let you say my first pick is, Jace, because you'll know I want to start with right away.
Probably Queen.
Yeah, Queen.
Yeah.
Queen. The most overrated band in British music history, as far as I'm concerned. Right. I'm going to try not to get too much on my soapbox here, and there's certain reasons why I dislike Queen, which aren't even anything to do with music. It's more to do with certain political actions and behaviours during the 1980s. But music-wise, I find them extremely hit and miss. I mean, some Queen songs that I think are absolute dross. Fat Bottom Girls.
I like that.
If anyone else had released that, it'd be like, well, that's a novelty song. That's like, bloody Roland Rat or Mr. Blobby could have released that. Like, I get it.
Yeah, I suppose. It was the way they did it, though. That's the thing. Which is probably why they got away with it.
Well, it's not... Yeah, I'm not about getting away with stuff. I'm not sort of expecting you to defend Queen's honour here. I'm just saying...
No.
these are songs that I think are just generally crap.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. I mean, go on. Anyway, what else?
Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Oh, Bohemian Rhapsody is kind of like the sort of definition of something being overrated. Yeah, it's got great musical moments, the composition of it, but it's way too long, it's way too overblown, and it's been re-released one too many times. It's been licensed out to movies one too many times. But if Queen's only sin for me was Bohemian Rhapsody, I could forgive them. But the thing about Queen is, I mean, they were, a big band, but people don't really talk with much fondness about their albums, and I kind of am not surprised by that because, they're a bit like sort of like maybe like Duran 10 years earlier. Like they're a singles band. No one's really gonna like give a shit about the albums because no one's really gonna be listening to the albums apart from the greatest hits every. The most selling Queen albums, greatest hits. But how many massive Queen fans, and obviously for people like Richard, who's a big record collector and what have you, how many so-called massive Queen fans are really going to be spinning A Night at the Opera or Queen 2 very often, or even the Flash Gordon soundtrack?
I've played them a few times since I've had them. I have, all right, but probably as much as any band. Are they my favourite band? No, I think there's bands that are better, but that's just that's personal taste more than anything else. I think for what they were trying to do, which was to be this sort of quite a grandiose, and they made no bones about it. They were trying to be this sort of big grandiose band and doing almost like these, Bohemian Rhapsody for all it was like a kind of like a rock opera, wasn't it? Really?
Well,
it was telling a story.
One. All right. Well, Bohemian Rhapsody, like I say, I can forgive that because I do respect what accomplishment it was. But all right, what about Bicycle Race?
That's a bit silly. It is a bit silly, but
why are we heaping praise on a group who would release that as a single? it makes no sense. You might as well just pin your colours to the mast and say, everything Stuff Aiken and Waterman did is up there with Lennon and McCartney,
Bollocks to that. My feelings on that matter. No, it's I get what you're saying about that, right? And maybe they shouldn't have done it, right? But then you've got sorry, what's saying?
Just mentioning some of his favourite Queen album. Look, the thing about Queen is, like, to say I've called them a singles outfit, not an albums one, for all I know, because I've never owned a Queen album. There might be a Queen album in their catalogue that I'd really like, because it'd be full of album tracks I'd never heard before. I'm really having to judge them on some singles, and because they released a lot of singles over the course of like 20 odd years nearly. I actually started preferring more of Queen probably more towards the late 80s when obviously they were winding down because of Freddie's illness. But another one where what I think's trite and it's a bit corny. And if Paul McCartney had recorded it, people would just be laughing at him. You're my best friend. I think that sucks. I think that's crap. If Paul McCartney, who is there with his cheesy grin and thumbs up, if he'd have released that, people would be like, "Oh, that's so lame." But because Queen did it, it's like, "Oh, we'll give them a pass." And I don't understand why Freddie Mercury, Brian May, etc., get a pass for a lot of stuff that other artists wouldn't. Do you know what I mean?
But then, I kind of get what you're saying. But then, I mean, okay, I'll give you an example, right? David Bowie, just off a little tangent here. David Bowie. I've got a track, right? My mum ended up buying me, and it's a novelty song. There's no two ways about it. It's a novelty song. But The Laughing Gnome by David Bowie. I love that.
Yeah, I don't think. No, I'm going to stop you there, Jason, because I don't think it's comparable. That was very early in Bowie's
Oh, it
career.
was. Yeah, it
When
was.
it was basically just chucking shit at the wall and seeing if any would stick, really. And
Yeah.
I'm, Richard McCook, who's here in the chat, and obviously completely disagrees with everything I've said about Queen. He's the massive Bowie super fan, so I don't
Yeah.
even really want to, spend too long on Bowie
No.
or anything. I don't find Bowie overrated. I'm not a Bowie
No.
fan per
I
se.
wasn't saying that. I'm just saying,
What
trying to
nor do I
compare with
think
the.
he's been overrated over the years. I think he's probably been rated fairly.
Yes, he has.
Whether
He has.
I
No,
feel
he
I
has.
like everything he's done or not, I
Yeah.
don't. But
No.
I can say that about most. I can say that about most acts. I don't like most of what Queen have done. I do like some of their tracks. Under Pressure, ironically featuring David Bowie, I think it's a
Yeah.
brilliant single. Love
It
it.
is. It is.
Love
Yeah.
Under Pressure. I liked a lot of the late 80s stuff as well, like Innuendo and
It's
things
funny
like
you
that.
mention. Yeah, it's funny you mention
But for
those
me,
because
Queen have released a lot of absolute dross that, like,
yeah. Well,
you wouldn't
maybe
give
they
to
were.
a boy band. Yet
Yeah.
Queen, because it's Freddie Mercury, because Brian May's the supposedly virtuoso guitarist, they just seem to get a pass from the press to an
Yeah.
extent. But I think general music fans, it's like the Queen is like the easy option, isn't it? It's like, oh well, if you don't really want to get into music, like just buy Queen's greatest hits. They're a bit like it reminds. I'll paraphrase a joke I heard on, I think it was Parks and Recreation about 10 years
Yeah.
ago, but they used it about Black Eyed Peas. But like Queen are like a rock band for people who don't like music. They don't like, like they'll hear something on an advert, film or a TV
Yeah.
show.
It's a phrase I'll probably use later for somebody else. Actually, no, I get what you said. It's not everyone's cup of tea, right? I get that. I think what it was, a lot of it for Queen was the showmanship. That was a lot of it.
Mm.
Their stage presence, the and it said, yeah, it was all this pomposity, whatever you want to call it, grandioso thing. That was them. That's who they were, and they made no bones about it. And you either liked it or you didn't, right? It was it's fine. You got the odd one or two tracks that you think, oh yeah, that's a good tune, and then okay, yes, maybe you're not there, but I have listened to the albums, and there's a lot of it I like. I can't remember what's on what album because my brain doesn't work like that. I can never remember what's on what album, but there's just certain things that stick out, and you think, oh yeah, right, that's a decent song, and I think some of their stuff's quite different to what they do with singles. I think that's the thing is as you say, you're judging them by the singles. I think
Yeah, I
perhaps
am. I'll hold my hand up to it.
yeah. I think perhaps if you listen to other stuff, you may. I'm not saying you will. You may find that you like it, right? And I think the stuff they did for the soundtrack albums, Highlander especially, which I think is even better than the Flash Gordon soundtrack, was brilliant. It was really, really good, right? But again, it's not everyone's thing. They are. You could say they're a bit Marmite in a way. So overblown.
Yeah.
Maybe as the years gone on, it's become more like that. And again, that's the press and everything, the rest of it. I do think that Brian May's becoming a bit of a money grabbing whatnot.
Well, yeah, I mean that's
that
another
did annoy
thing.
me.
I didn't want to go into the sort of the re-licensing of Queen and all the reissues and the new tours with Adam Lambert or whoever, or that guy out of Bad Company and all the rest of it. That's because that's not really about the music for me. But I will say I 100% agree. I think Brian May and Roger Taylor have raped Queen's legacy in their catalogue. And I'm saying that as someone who doesn't really give much of a toss for the majority of it. But even I realise they're trying to wring every last penny out of that. And it comes a time and it's like, well, you know, do you really need to record a duet with Wyclef Jean? I've got nothing against Wyclef Jean, but was there any need for that? Oh, it's on a film, Small Soldiers.
Yeah.
Like watching Shaun of the Dead, Don't Stop Me Now. And then McFly covered it, albeit for charity.
Oh, yeah, don't even get me started on them.
Yeah, but the thing is, their version didn't sound much worse than Queen's because they were both too similar. They didn't put any spin on it. It was basically Queen's, but it had like, you know, some barely pubescent lad on vocals.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Queen, and like I say, there's certain Queen songs are like Under Pressure, a little bit of the 80s stuff when they were going a little bit synth is all right, but there again, depends what mood I'm in. But so Queen is overrated for me. But Jason, who's your next overrated artist? Because I don't want to talk about Queen, so I'm worried about losing subs. Please don't unsub me, Richard.
Oh well, you might lose some more in a minute.
Okay. Because of you. Well, at least I can blame you for it then.
Coldplay. Overrated. Definitely. They started off all right. I have 3 Coldplay albums. I don't play them anymore.
What, do you?
Right. I do. I have 3 Coldplay.
I never knew that. No wonder you kept that quiet, mate.
the first 2, not bad. Not bad. They're listenable. The third one, absolute tripe. It's bloody awful. I don't know why I haven't thrown it in the bin, quite frankly. But no, they've got far too big for their boots. You know, I mean, you were saying for rock music for people that don't like music. Well, you've got that rock pop element, haven't you? Right?
Well, yeah.
And it was
kind of like indie for those who don't really like proper indie, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that was the thing. They started up with their first stuff was indie, I think. It was, and then they said, "Oh, you know, we've got to now that we're getting somewhere, right? Let's do all the cliched stuff. Let's do all the generic stuff because we know we're going to sell whatever. Let's go off and do something with Jay-Z or whoever, right? What a load of bollocks."
Okay.
You know, I'm sorry, but it's they should have stuck to their roots. If they had stuck to their roots, right? Okay, maybe they wouldn't have been as big as they are, right? But that's just the point. Should they have been as big as they are? You know.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
My problem with Coldplay, well, it's not my only problem with them, but it's Chris Martin, really. I mean, that's the thing about Coldplay. I mean, I couldn't pick the other 3 guys out of a lineup, really, but that's by the by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Coldplay for me, I think at one stage, it was probably around when you started disliking them, around the 3rd album. I think they thought, hang on, you know what? We could be like the new U2, and we could just, do these elaborate world tours, and Chris Martin could just poke his nose into certain political and social issues that, maybe he didn't, he wasn't best qualified to talk about, I don't even think I've heard anything off their last couple of albums.
No, I haven't.
I think the last Coldplay single that I thought was all right that I remember hearing was Viva La Vida, that must be about
that was the 3rd album.
But
that was the 3rd album.
It's probably even older. The thing is, I only really like that more now because the Pet Shop Boys covered it and their cover. Well, you know what a massive Pet Shop Boys fan I am.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I can't dispute your choice here, really. I think as musicians define, I think some of their collaborations have been a bit questionable.
Well, this is what I was on about, yeah.
Questionable. There we are.
Yeah,
Too many
you know
syllables.
they went
Like,
with Jay-Z because Jay-Z was popular, not
yeah, it's
because
like,
necessarily they admired him or respected him
yeah.
as an artist.
Well, they did a duet with BTS, didn't they? And I've never heard it, and
Did
I don't
they?
want to hear it because, like, I'm
Oh,
not into Korean boy bands. They did something with an act that were popular about 10 years ago that I don't even know if you hear of them now, called Chainsmokers. It was like a dance production kind of thing.
no, I can't
They've
say that
done
I do.
they've done some unusual collaborate. There's other ones. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
some quite big female vocalists they've worked with as well. And it's like, I think it's basically, I think Chris Martin, he's like a pound shop Bono, let's be honest. That's what he is, isn't he? It's like, it's
yeah,
like he's Bono now that Bono's kind of winding down and like getting ready for his pipe and slippers. It's like, oh, it's all right, Bono. I'll take the mantle of being like someone who, is high on the smell of his own farts.
Yes,
Like
yes.
really sort of pompous kind of, oh, this is how you should be living your life sort of thing. He
Yeah,
married
no,
Gwyneth Paltrow for God's sake, which
yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow, attractive woman and stuff. But have you actually ever seen her get interviewed? What a chore being married to that woman must have been, with her weird dietary fads and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Coldplay. Yeah. I think, overrated. They're not an awful group. Oh, I meant to keep that up a bit longer. They're not an awful group. But I think their best days were, as you said, Jason, like early. Chris Bell has made some good points. That is, but the best couple of Embrace. I do quite like Embrace. I've not listened to all of Embrace's stuff, but I would certainly rate Embrace higher than Coldplay generally, because that's just my opinion on it. But yeah, Coldplay overrated. I don't think there's any reason to kind of challenge you on that really for me.
No.
But to be fair, Chris Martin, I suppose, as a songwriter, is as good as anyone. But it just their music does nothing for me. It doesn't make me feel. It doesn't give me goosebumps, which I think they kind of go for, don't they? Just like they're a bit earnest. They want to tug at your heartstrings, and they just haven't managed it with me. They just failed to do so.
It was comes across. Certainly as I say, the latest stuff comes across as a bit sort of they're trying too hard and not succeeding, and kind of fake, really.
Yeah, it is. It's all a bit
lacking true emotion, which I think their earlier stuff had proper emotion to it.
Yeah, it all feels a bit cynical now. Oh, yeah, like we want you to take us seriously as musicians. Oh, look, we've just done a duet with like 7 Korean lads.
Yeah, and it's all a bit
nothing against Korean singers, but I mean BTS have obviously got a very specific fan base of like anyone who's female and under a certain age. Why? Coldplay are just trying to sort of leech off their popularity, like they did with Chainsmokers, like they did with Jay-Z, and a couple of others I'm forgetting as well. So yeah.
But it's all a bit paint by. I was just going to say to finish off, it was all a bit paint by numbers for me now with them.
Well, yeah, I've not deliberately avoided, but I've just not heard anything that they've done for a little while anyway. So I couldn't tell you, I couldn't tell you whether they've improved. But I just take a look at who they're working with, and I'm like, well, I'm never going to listen to BTS. So why am I going to listen to BTS with Coldplay?
No,
I'm not.
No,
that's one doesn't make the other one better, really. Not in that respect, anyway. So my next. I think my next overrated band will probably surprise you a bit, Jason.
Okay.
They're a band who I've never actually had any of their albums. I never owned any, still don't. I've tried to buy some on mini disc before, but I've always been outbidded. But I do think, for the large part, I think on and off over the years, they've been really overrated. And it is someone with, well, you very briefly mentioned them earlier on, Jason. I'm talking about Blur.
Fair
Blur
enough.
for me. I'm trying to think of the best way of putting it. I think Blur, a little bit like Queen, where, like, you know, it's the singles you remember, but, you know, they did have some quite memorable albums. Ironically enough, my brother had the album. He had the first 3 or 4 out. No, I don't think he ever had the first one with Leisure. I think that was, weren't it? But he definitely had Part Life. And he definitely had The Great Escape. And I remember buying him Modern Life is Rubbish, which I don't think he ever listened to, particularly because I don't think anyone liked that at the time anyway. But I myself never owned any Blur stuff. I don't even think I ever got any of their singles.
No. It's that novelty thing again, isn't it, to an extent?
Because they're a band I was thinking, like, you know, like, particularly during my teenage years, like, what bands did I just not show an interest in? And then eventually I realised it was like, well, I never got into Blur, and then I've been trying to kind of figure out why ever since, really. And I don't know. Country House, I enjoyed that at the time. I think it's sort of got diminishing returns now for me, Country House. And the video is just basically like Damien Hirst's idea of a Carry On movie, and it's
yeah. Well, I think even they said the video
quite witty, but looking at it now, 25 years later, it's like, well, yeah, it's a bit crap actually. The Universal, I did really like that single actually, but then again, I am a bit of a sucker for indie songs that use a lot of strings. And there was another one, I think it might have been off Part Life, End of a Century. I enjoyed that single as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris makes a good point in that even Damon Albarn himself would call Blur overrated. Yeah. The benefit of hindsight exposes them as riding a wave in the 90s, and it peaked with Park Life. Yeah.
They very much
my nerves pretty quickly. I will the single. I mean, and Girls and Boys. Yeah, and even with the Pet Shop Boys remix, and I will bring them up again, but even with the Pet Shop Boys remix, I think Girls and Boys is actually a pretty rubbish song, all in all. But that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They were. Go on.
No. You carry on.
I was just going to say, they very much were trying to be that quintessential English band, weren't they? Really, like and you know this, the influence, but like the Kinks would sing about things that were very much English that possibly other bands wouldn't have touched. Dedicated follower of fashion, all that lot, right? Now, I like those songs, right? And I can see what Blur were trying to do, right? Is sort of bring it into the 90s, all the rest of it. But I do think Country House, to a lesser extent Park Life, were kind of novelty records for them. You said about Queen and that, and
in the whole Blur versus Oasis battle, which was 95% media hype, and then 5% just like Noel and Liam just calling Damon a "see you next Tuesday" every so often.
Exactly.
But, Blur were always seen as the more intelligent band, and I think there was a bit of a kind of northern to southern sort of discrimination well, in a way, because like Blur
was definitely that,
Blur were considered more middle class and more well educated than those northern, kind of hooligans, really. But if you look at certainly the lyrics for Girls and Boys, I mean, I get what they're trying to say. It's like a commentary on your sort of club 1830 holidays, but it's all a bit kind of, I don't know, I don't know. It kind of is a blend for me of sort of them being a bit snobby, and then also just kind of bottom feeding really with the lyrics. It's a tricky one, girls and boys,
There
but
are
ultimately
some of their
it's
songs.
a song that I never massively liked it when it came out, and I don't like it even more now.
Yeah, it's. I think they had their high moments, right? Again with the same as I said with Oasis, they had some bloody good songs, right? I like some of their early stuff, like "There's No Other Way." I did like that because that was almost like the whole Manchester thing, wasn't it? Initially, before Britpop became a thing.
There were classes kind of your sort of baggy, maybe Virgin and Shoegate kind of thing when they first started.
And then their later stuff, right? I love Coffee and TV. I think that's a great tune.
It's all right. I remember the video. The video was really good.
Yeah. Well, there's partly that as well, which helped. But no, I just thought because it was wasn't it Graham on vocals primarily?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So it was different. Yeah, I mean, again, you could compare Oasis and Blur still, but again, I agree with you to an extent. They were overhyped, right? Did they deserve all the accolades they got? No, right? Did they do some good tunes? Yes.
Yeah.
Were there better bands? Yes.
Yeah. If you want to take it purely from a Britpop context, I would say, Suede and Pulp for two were contemporary to Blur and Blur's sort of Britpop era.
Yeah.
They were instant. They were miles better. There were other bands who probably aren't comparable particularly, but who may not have been as good as Blur in a lot of respects, but may have been trying to be a bit like Blur. I'm trying to think of like kind of your kind of Blur lights of the time, maybe Menswear to a slight extent. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
There again, it's not overly relevant to this discussion, but Coffee and TV. I've never pitched a massive tent for it, but it's all right. I wouldn't call it bad, but I wouldn't call it one of my favourites from them either. It's kind of in the middle, really, for me. That song
just
two,
one that sticks in my head.
Song 2, I got fed up of hearing it. Even though it's only like about a minute and 50 seconds long, it's like
overplayed.
There again, it was a bit it felt a bit sort of cynical. Like, we're trying to crack America. This is what Americans are like. Us sort of like trying to resurrect grunge a little bit with this.
I think they did say that. I did think they did say that themselves. It was sort of like the grungy undertone of it. I don't know. So,
actually, I've just remembered there was one Blur single I did own on CD, and I think I played it to my brother because he'd never heard it. And bear in mind, he used to be a Blur fan, but he kind of left all his Britpop behind when he just started getting into like gangster rap and things like that.
Fair enough, and
I played it, and he's like, "Oh God, that's so shit! Like, what's happened to Blur?" But I think no, I probably wouldn't call it my favourite Blur single now, but it'd probably be like number 3 or maybe number 4. But I don't know. I liked the gospel kind of feel to it, and that was Tender from 1999.
Oh no, I wasn't keen on that.
I like that enough, even though I never thought about ever buying a Blur album.
Yeah,
I did
was that the one he did about Justine?
I don't know. I don't know what it was about. I mean, it might be about her because I suppose that might have been around the time they were breaking up.
I think it was. Yeah,
I'm not sure, but I really like that. I still like it. For me, I prefer sort of like your more string laden ballads like The Century and the Universal, but which are two albums that I think were overrated at the time. A, Park Life, B, The Great Escape. The Great Escape, obviously, that was kind of that was fighting kind of a losing battle because it was pitched in that whole Oasis versus Blur kind of time period, and it was Country House, got to number one, Roll With It didn't, but that was really a case of winning a battle but losing a war really.
I've got some other thoughts on that, but I'll save that for another day.
Yeah,
because I know we're going to be talking about things in more detail at a later date. So yeah.
Well, yeah. All being well, we will get back to Blur, Oasis, and Britpop, and in general, in a future old Sodcast. So yeah, I don't think I've explained myself brilliantly, but there's just something about Blur.
I get it.
Blur in theory kind of. They tick a lot of boxes for me. 90s, I grew up with them, but they just, I'm not feeling it with them. I can pick certain songs out, and I really like that. But then I'm like, I don't want to listen to the albums, because there's other stuff that I've heard of theirs. I'm just not impressed whatsoever. So, yeah. So that's Blur as an overrated artist, or an overrated group, I should say, for me. Jason, who have you got for us next?
Well, this is one that's just sprung into my mind, actually.
I'm glad somebody asked for you, because I'm going to be struggling soon.
Right. It's a band that I used to love. I've seen them live. They were great live, all the rest of it. But they've not dated particularly well. And that's Def Leppard. I used to be a massive Def Leppard fan. Really did. Hysteria is still a great album. Right? It's a little bit cheesy in places, but it's still a great album. I think what changed my taste, if you will, were two things. One, I saw Smashing Pumpkins live the same year that I saw Def Leppard live, and I preferred the Smashing Pumpkins gig. Right? So what does that tell you? Also, John Mutt Lange, right? And his influence is all over that album. All over that album. Because if you listen to Waking Up the Neighbours by Bryan Adams, and some of the Car stuff, which was produced by him, they've all got that very similar sound. All the harmonies and things in certain places and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's all very polished and clean and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I think. That's what bugged me, because when I saw them live, you thought you were listening to the album. Did they put on a show? Yes, they did. All the pyros and the elevating drum kit and all the rest of it. This was for the Adrenalize tour, which was produced by somebody else, I think. But I think their heyday was Hysteria, and then before that, some of the earlier albums had some good tracks on there as well. Things like High and Dry and all the rest of it, right? But again, it's another band that had too much success thrust on them too soon, right? Yes, we've been going for X number of years before they became famous over here, but it was almost like they changed who they were to achieve that. Do you know what I mean? And again, and then they were trying to, do bigger and better things each time. And you listen to Adrenalize, really, it's not that great an album. Not really. It's okay, but considering it was, the follow-up to Hysteria, it was pretty average.
Yeah. It is often the case, though, isn't it? Like you release a big album that's got a load of singles. I remember about 6 singles coming off Hysteria, and all of them probably got at least 20 in the UK, and similar in the US. I'd bet as well. Hello to Rob Walker as well. Yeah, good point there, Rob. We've not talked about Radiohead, but I felt I might get onto those later if I started struggling. The thing that, sorry, I mean, we will get back to Def Leppard in a sec, Jason. I do apologise.
Okay, no, it's right. No, it's fine. It's fine.
The thing about Radiohead, for me, they were kind of like, do I find them overrated or do I just find them absolutely shit throughout? And I've never liked Radiohead. I've tried, maybe not in recent years, but certainly when I was a teenager, I tried, and I just couldn't get it. Maybe if I tried again, I might like a bit of their stuff. But anyway, so maybe we might get back to Radiohead because, but I was in two minds whether to talk about them because I've never rated them. Yeah, I do know, anyone who's into prog and musicianship and Tom York. I never liked his voice neither, but just they were, they're considered one of the greatest British groups of like the past 30 years, but they just left me cold. Def Leppard, Hysteria. I know what you mean about Lange's production. I think I've got albums that he's produced, and there's that sort of a little bit over polished sound to them, where like it's kind of produced like a bit of the grit and the dirt out of it, and it's
it's got to have all these perfect harmonies.
But it was a successful album, and although I've never listened to the whole album in full, it's an album I've thought about buying once or twice when I've seen it come up. I've just never pulled the trigger on it.
If you get it,
I generally like all the singles off that. I think singles.
Well, I did at the time.
Def Leppard released some brilliant singles.
Yeah,
and
I did at the time.
Whether they would have sounded better or worse with a different producer, I honestly couldn't say really.
No, I think it was just, as I said I said it was just very much of the time, and you listen to it now, and some of it is really cheese laden. It really is. One of my favourite tracks on there, anyway. I think did Richard say he was into Def Leppard?
I don't know, Richard. I mean, if you're still here, Richard, then let us know if you're a Def Leppard fan.
Well, anyway, anyone who's got the album, probably my favourite track on there isn't a single. It's called Gods of War, and that was actually a good track. That was actually a damn good track, and I still like it to this day.
Yeah, fair enough. That can be the case, really. For a lot of albums, really, an album might have 4, 5, even 6 singles off it, or bloody 8 if you're Michael Jackson or someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then your favourite happens to be the one they didn't release as a single. I know I've like a lot of my favourite bands, like New Order. There's although to start with, they didn't actually put singles on albums, but even so, certainly Technique. All as much as I like the singles that came off there, all my very favourites off that album, which is an album that I absolutely love anyway.
Yeah.
Just standard album tracks that never got even considered for single release.
Maybe something to consider for another discussion.
Well,
it's quite good.
Yeah, songs that could have been singles. Yeah, I'll certainly add that to the list of possible Sodcast ideas. Yeah.
No, there was someone in our law anyway that said they were into Def Leppard. I'm sure there was.
Yeah,
can't remember.
Yeah, you're probably right. I can't think offhand. I know he won't be watching. Perhaps he might watch the replay though, because he does watch my channel from time to time. But TC Kirkham, who does the Kirkham Report on his channel TKR Video Central, he is a massive Def Leppard fan. So if he was here now, he would be why you're wrong to overrate them. Because he thinks they're the best thing since sliced bananas, really.
But again, I used to love them. Why else would I have gone to see him live?
I probably liked them more when I was younger than I do now. I was never a fan, but I like them. You know, I heard them on the top 40 a lot. I saw them on Top of the Pops a good few times. Saw them on the chart show, and I never rolled my eyes and thought, oh, Def Leppard, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, Def Leppard's new video or Def Leppard's new single, great. So
you gave
I get it. I suppose maybe your tastes have changed a little bit, Jason. Perhaps.
Oh, well, in that year, there was the same. It was 92, I think, because I saw in the round, right, for the Adrenalize tour, 7-day weekend tour, and then later on in the year, I think towards the end of the year, I saw Smashing Pumpkins, who had just released Cherub Rock and Siamese Dream as their album. And I think it was the rawness that blew me away. If Def Leppard had kept the raw element, my taste might not have changed. But it was more of a fun gig. It was a smaller gig. It was more fun.
Do you think it's a fair argument? And maybe I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate here, but in another way, not really. Do you think if Hysteria in particular, and maybe a little bit of what came before and after it, hadn't had that kind of American radio friendly sort of Mutt Lange or Mutt Lange style production, do you think they would have been as big a band in America and therefore here? I mean, they are a British band. They're from just up the road in the world.
They were already quite big in America anyway. Before Hysteria came out, they were already big. I mean, they're the first three, because remember, Hysteria was their fourth album, right? I have kept the 4-pack of the first 4 albums. Nothing else, but I've kept that. I don't know. I think they would have still been. I think they still could have been successful over here, right? Because
I'm wondering, they really had that Americanized sound, really from.
Yeah, well, they did.
Probably from Pyromania, maybe. I'd guess. Because I think it's the single off that I quite like, Photograph, and like
yes, that's a good tune.
I heard that and I was like, oh yeah, that's Def Leppard. You can tell it's them right away.
Yeah.
So,
well, I actually found out about them through getting a badge with their logo on that my mum got me because she thought it was heavy metal related, right? Rock related, but she never heard of them. She just got me the badge, and then I heard about the band. So I actually knew about them before I knew what any of their music sounded like, which is weird.
Yeah, I've got no, as you can tell, I've got no really strong negative feelings about Def Leppard.
No.
So, in theory, I should really be debating you and arguing with you, but I do get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not like it's Queen where I can just sort of stand on my soapbox and just like rant till my heart's content. But I understand. I don't know. I wouldn't say they're overrated now because you don't really hear a lot.
Oh,
I know they're still going.
Yeah.
But if maybe at the time, late 80s into the early 90s, perhaps they were a little bit ubiquitous. So on certain platforms, perhaps, I quite like Def Leppard. Like I say, if I see Hysteria going for a bargain price one day, I will endeavour to pick it up, or some sort of greatest hits maybe. But they're just not a band I've been interested in collecting, certainly. And I think like you, I probably enjoyed them more when I was younger anyway. So why try and turn the clock back on them? Really, let's just leave them as a happy memory from. From my childhood and when you were about 35, geez. So my next overrated band, and I don't know, no one mentioned them, but I just suddenly realised the group I always found overrated. Certain people would no doubt think I was talking out my arse here, but I'm going to say, I mostly never liked them, but I don't want to say I just dislike them outright because I respect how important they were to people and to a certain music scene. But for me, they did nothing for me, and they were definitely overrated by their fans and by music magazines and stuff, particularly of the time. And I'm gonna have to pick Nirvana. Oh, have I finally upset Jason?
No, I do kind of get it. I would never say I was a massive Nirvana fan. In fact, if anything, I prefer the Foo Fighters.
I mean, I have some Foo Fighters I like, but a lot just I can take it or leave it. But for me, I feel a bit unfair just to single Nirvana out here. I feel like I should be picking grunge music in general. It was just a scene that, you know, I went to school with people who, like, as soon as Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, you know, there were people sewing Nirvana patches onto the school bags, and I remember one drippy lad who like used to practice his guitar on the school bus, and like he was always trying to play Teen Spirit and, you know, whatever else Nirvana had on Nevermind at the time. I could never get into them. Like the bits of their early stuff back, you know, the late 80s when they were real underground Seattle grunge, punky kind of outfit. The Bleach era, I suppose. Bleach being their debut album. All that I've heard of that has just been utter noise. Never mind.
Probably was.
Nevermind, obviously, it was their first album for a major label. I think it was Geffen Records, weren't it?
Geffen, pretty sure,
probably some early Nirvana fans would have found that a sellout. You could argue Smells Like Teen Spirit has got certain pop elements to it.
I suppose.
I just didn't get it. It was like the sort of grunge scene, really. Like it wanted you to be sort of miserable and kind of smelly and scruffy and downbeat, and I was like, why? Like you're making a choice to be maudlin and just to be negative all the time, and it's like, and for me, Nirvana were kind of like the poster childs of all that. You know, I feel unfair to single them out and single Kurt Cobain out when, you know, he's not here to, you know, not that defend himself to me, because I'm sure if he was still alive, watch this stream. But the whole grunge thing was just, it just left me cold, really.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I would say. Sorry, just see what's said actually.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair enough. I mean, their music, it's just does nothing for me. I mean, Rob says here, and I you know, maybe Rob is probably, you know, exaggerating for effect here, but. You know, it's funny you say that, actually, Rob. I was thinking about my own record collection, my own music collection, only like yesterday, I think it was, and I realised like I've got very little by American artists. Like,
I've got a fair bit.
There might be one American act where I've collected all of his albums, and that'll be one that no one's heard of. Picture Plane.
Yes.
Like, no one knows who Picture Plane is unless I mention him on a video, which I haven't for quite a while. And I was racking my brain thinking I must collect more American music than that. And then I thought, well, actually, I don't think I do.
Yeah.
And
I've got sort of like individual albums by a lot of American bands rather than the whole catalogue, shall we say. I think the main one I've got of that would probably be Ugly Kid Joe. And even not all their albums are great. You know, a lot of people don't like them.
Nirvana, now, look, like I say, overrated doesn't mean that I hate them across the board. I'd struggle to pick a Nirvana song that I like. Perhaps there's bits like when they did that Unplugged thing that would be, you know, quite pleasant. But even then, I wouldn't get overly excited about it. Weezer, yes, Weezer. Thank you. I knew they were a band. Why don't Weezer is? Yeah, I do like Weezer. For some reason. You know what? I can take that on board. I have collected Weezer. I made a point of collecting all their albums, and some of them some of them are very samey to what came before it. But to be fair to Weezer, like the last couple of albums, which was Van Weezer and OK Human, were very different. Like they actually made an effort to like mix it up a bit and change the style. But there'll always be kind of that kind of power pop band who did Holly, really. Let's be honest. But I am a Weezer fan. I'm glad Rob Walker knows my record collection better than I do because I'm completely.
I should have twigged myself to think about it.
The Teal album, the covers one. Well, it's funny you say that actually, Chris, because I've got that album. I like it, but my problem with it is they don't really attempt to sound any different to the acts they're covering. They cover all sorts of people on there: Michael Jackson, TLC. Toto Africa was their single from it, but it all sounds a bit too similar to the original for me, all out on the Teal album. But that doesn't mean I don't like it. I'm glad it's a good album, and it as covers albums go.
I think I know we were saying if you don't, what I was just going to say about grunge as a whole. I think what happened, it was the right thing at the right time. I think that's why it became successful as it did. It was all the disenchanted youth, of America, and they just they just tapped into the right medium.
I
respect stuff,
the movement, and I get where it started from. I've watched documentaries about Nirvana and about the grunge scene, and there's some of my favorite music documentaries to watch because I just find like the sort of subculture of grunge really interesting. But when it gets down to me and what music I listen to, it's like that's it. I don't want to listen to it. I don't find it enjoyable. It's the sort of thing I like to learn about the history and the origins of it, but I don't actually want to listen to it.
Yeah, I can get that. No, I mean, I if you want to get into that category, I personally out of the three big ones, right, I preferred Pearl Jam, right, and they were very.
For me, that's what I'm saying. I feel like I shouldn't have singled Nirvana out here. They were the obvious sort of poster boys to do so. But it was, really for me, it was like the grunge as a musical genre in general. Really, I find overrated.
I think a lot of people found it too depressing because of the content it was talking about, right? Because it wasn't. It was quite a lot of it was quite dark. I mean, Jeremy by.
Maybe I suppose touching on what you said a little bit, Jason. Maybe. The whole darkness and dinginess of it and that kind of DIY feel, in a way it was good that it happened because in this country, I'm not talking about America where obviously it would have originated from, the Pacific Northwest to be precise, but in this country, you had like all your teenagers like into grunge and then suddenly it was Britpop where the Union Jack was cool again and things were a little bit brighter,
Yeah.
And even like sort of like your more serious artists who were in the Britpop genre, they were still making sort of like quite sort of eye-catching videos, and the music generally was just a little bit brighter. You know what I mean? But it's from Britpop's a British thing, and grunge is an American thing.
Yeah. Although you did have crikey, wasn't it Bush? They were a British grunge band.
Well, they were just bloody cosplaying at it, weren't they?
They were a bit, yeah. But no, it's it was. I think it was the right thing at the right time for that, and there was a lot of bad crap going on in America at the time, and I think it was just, this is how we feel about society as a whole. you know, because you know what Jeremy was about, don't you?
No.
It was about the school and shootings, high school shootings.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. It's about a specific
I
one.
Don't Like Mondays was about a school shooting as well, wasn't it?
Which one?
I Don't Like Mondays by Boomtown Rats. That was
Yes,
about a
I think
school
so. Yeah,
shooting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was that that was that, and I really liked that song, but it was the lyrics. Jeremy spoke in class today, right? He never spoke. He was always the kid that was getting ripped on, right? And the singer even says, how we taunted the poor boy, right? And then he ends up talking because he's in the process of shooting somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very dark, and I think
hey lads.
yeah, but I think that was the thing.
So Nirvana / grunge for me, overrated.
Yeah.
I understand it was a scene that probably had to happen in America and probably to an extent over here, but I think a lot of it was kind of like, I'm going by sort of, sitting with pricks on the school bus really who like thought they were, they were growing their hair all long and greasy and trying to look and sound like Kurt Cobain. And it's like, no, you're just like you're a 13-year-old lad in Derbyshire, mate. Behave.
They thought it was cool, and they actually
dingy and a bit kind of, a bit sort of, pit stainy and things like that.
Yeah,
and
it was.
I think Britpop it kind of blew it out. It blew it away, and that's one thing I'm glad of Britpop. Glad for Brit. I don't know if I can say it. That's one thing I'm glad of Britpop for. I'm still not sure I've said that. But anyway, so yeah, Nirvana / grunge music. So I feel a little bit bad for singling Nirvana out.
I will say that I think the whole thing is that it was cool. They thought, I want to be like Kurt because he's cool. Let's latch onto this because it's cool, right? Not necessarily because they didn't appreciate the music for what it was, but they latched onto it, right?
Yeah,
what was
that t-shirts and badges and things I saw with that Nirvana smiley face kind of logo back in 93, 94.
Yeah, you're saying that, right? The one that it reminded me of was this was like what 10, 15 years ago. Everybody suddenly latched onto the Ramones. Do you remember everyone was wearing a Ramones t-shirt?
Yeah, no one
right? No one knew who they were.
Yeah, no one was listening to the music. No, it was like I don't know, it was Topshop or something like that that had got licensed to do Ramones t-shirts.
Yeah, they
and
thought
for
it was a fashion label.
Particularly for like sort of younger women, like it became like one of the most popular shirts to wear. Even though like you could go up to one of them in a Ramones shirt and say, "Oh, what's your favorite Ramones song?" It's like,
no, I don't know.
But there's similarities, but for me different, and that wasn't about the music because it was just licensing the Ramones out of like a brand, a bit like how people license the sort of Joy Division Unknown Pleasures album sleeve out to like they'll put it on. I mean, it's Half Man Half Biscuit who wrote the song Joy Division Oven Gloves, which was basically a satirical swipe at the merchandising of an old and respected outfit, really. Just before we move on, I'll just have a look at what Chris says, because he says about it tapped beautifully into teen angst. The grunge scene as a whole was a bit blur. I mean that's I could do with you taking over from me as host of this, Chris, because you're way more verbose and you know how to say these things. Like I just get all my words. That is I mean, it was a scene that was important, I think, in music and in particularly young person teenage culture in America, and maybe to an extent over here as well. But it just the whole kind of genre and the whole subculture of it for me was just.
I do wonder how Kurt's music would have changed if he'd lived. I think his music would have changed.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have bound to eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
you get the feeling that if he was really that sort of sick of the music industry, that he might have
Yeah.
taken just a lot of years off. But then again,
Yeah.
think about who he was married to, and
Oh, crikey, yeah.
him being at the behest of a multinational record company, and
Yeah,
whether he would have
exactly.
allowed to kind of take an extended break or not, who knows? You can say what ifs, but and I always wonder what if Ian Curtis hadn't killed himself and Joy Division would have carried on. Tony Wilson always said that Joy Division would have gone on to be bigger than U2, which
possibly.
The thing is, though, like no one in Joy Division / New Order is like that sort of Bono type who's just going to stand up for the starving millions and the rainforests and anything. So I think really that would have been where Joy Division they would have got big. They would have made it big in America, but I think they would have kind of hit a roadblock after a while. And
Maybe.
like for that sort of politicized music, as much as we all make fun of him for it, I think it needed someone like Bono just to be that voice, really. Because I don't think Ian Curtis would have been that politicized voice, really. I know we kind of drifting off topic here, but I wanted to mention that because I did bring up Joy Division briefly. So have you got another overrated band for us, Jason, or overrated solo artist, of course, or duo?
I'm going to go with Madonna.
I might talk to them all now.
Madonna.
If you have to mention the one that I said not to mention because you just think he's a cock, then you can if you want. But I was hoping
no. As I said, Madonna. Not you two. Madonna. I think the problem for me was a lot of it was her attitude. She did do some good stuff. Some of her early stuff was quite good for the 80s, right? Then she sort of went off on a bit of a tangent, and I wasn't overly impressed. And then she kind of had another peak in sort of like I think it was the early 90s, which I actually quite liked, right? But I don't think she was anywhere near as good as what she thought she was. I think she had the right people, a smart woman, right?
Yeah,
whatever. She was smart. She was a smart woman. She knew who she wanted to work with. She knew the right people to work with, and that's why, right? I think she was as successful as she was. I don't think she was the best singer ever, right? I think there are better singers. But again, I don't dislike the woman, right? I just don't think she was as good as what she could be. I mean, the album that stands out for me was Ray of Light.
Good album. I've got it.
Right? Yeah. And do you know why?
Yes,
because
I do.
It wasn't so much
I know what you're going to say, but say it.
William Orbit. Orbit wrote and produced most. All right, she had a hand in it, obviously, but I mean, William Orbit produced a hell of a lot of that album. It was his sounds, and again, she was smart. She picked up the right person to work with because he was becoming quite popular. He had the thing with Bassomatic, and then he did stuff for All Saints as well, didn't he? Their second album, and it was good stuff. It was good sort of, would you call it ambient?
Yeah, ambient dance, electronic.
Sort of, yeah. It was very different for her, and I quite enjoy. And I did enjoy it, but I do think she was overblown. I think she was in the spotlight far more than she deserved to be. Right?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, as you know, I'm a Madonna collector and a Madonna fan, but only really a specific point in her career. That's from the start till the late 90s, turn of the 2000s. So, I'm kind of leaning more towards the side of Rob Walker here. I don't think ultimately she's been overrated. So, some of her singles, and because I've got them, I've listened to them. I can appreciate everything about them. So their albums from certainly the 80s are great. I think my favorite 80s Madonna album is probably still Like a Prayer. I would have thought. Although that actually True Blue's like I've got some really strong stuff on it. So
I was going to mention that one. Yeah,
it's usually a bit of a toss up between those two for me. But yeah, she kind of fell off a bit. Erotica, I spent ages looking for that for a good price on vinyl, and like even though I knew it probably wouldn't be my favorite Madonna album ever, and it's not. That it had one or two all right songs on it, but generally it felt like she was a bit past her best. Bedtime Stories, which was a couple of years later, I think was an improvement. And then Ray of Light, as you say, really good album. Some of my favourite work she's ever done's on that. And then the most recent Madonna album I've got, and I wasn't even going to get it really, but it was on sale somewhere, is Music from 2000, which is patchy for me. It's all right. And then anything by Madonna kind of after 2000, really, I've just paid hardly any attention to. I mean, a lot of comments here. So I think you've riled the comments section a little bit here. But, Leroy Screwball says Madonna broke boundaries and was a true pioneer of pop.
No, I never said she didn't. I never said she didn't.
Rob thinks that you're going to say Prince is overrated. He won't say Prince is overrated because I know Jason is a Prince fan. So, all right. Then maybe not. Maybe he might get on.
I do like a lot of Prince. The thing is with Prince, I wasn't a massive fan at the time. Right? I think I think he was a bit of a pompous ass. I think he believed his own shit. Right? But he did some good stuff, and I've never said right. I don't dislike Madonna. I just don't think she's as good as she thought she was. Right? Yeah. Did she do some good stuff? Did she help 80s music progress?
She was at certain points, but not. But for me, it wasn't consistent. I think, like I say, True Blue's a brilliant album. Like a Prayer's a brilliant album. The debut, which probably got released it was probably made quite cheaply, and it was maybe considered a flash in the pan. That's got some great stuff on it. Stuff like Borderline, Star, great electro pop singles, really early Madonna stuff.
I think perhaps
like Virgin, obviously, which I think was arguably a breakout album. Leroy says being on top of her game for 20 years. Well, I mean, now you say 20 years, but like, is that 20 years from when she started? Because like, if you'd say 20 years back from now, is like no. She hasn't been on top of a game for at least for me at least about 23, 25 years, really, something like that. Like now she's just kind of, she's like this weird sort of middle-aged lady who's had too much plastic surgery done, and she's trying to keep herself relevant. It's a bit like Coldplay in that, like you can guarantee that, like if she puts a new album out, she's gonna have some Flavour of the Month guesting with her on it.
Yeah, she probably worked with Coldplay actually.
I've not had any interest in Madonna. I mean, I think Hung Up, the single she did in what was that, about 2005-ish, that sampled ABBA. That was probably her last really good single. And I quite liked her cover of American Pie, weirdly enough, even though that's a song I was never too keen on originally. Strangely,
I prefer the original myself. Yeah, no, it's.
I prefer Madonna's version. Really, I think the original, like the full length version, just seems to go on for me too long.
Yeah.
She meant the first 20 years, Lee. Sort of, when she started, which was,
84,
3 to
something
about
like that,
2000, about 2000, I'd say. Was her glory years, but she was inconsistent in that. Like Erotica isn't a brilliant album. Bedtime Story is
was that
better,
Dick Tracy one?
I'm Breathless, the Dick Tracy soundtrack. That I've got that. That's crap. That is crap.
Yeah,
and that was
Panky.
Madonna's peak period. I mean, I recommend anyone get a copy of the Immaculate Collection because as a greatest hits album for showing. I mean, there's actually a lot of stuff I like that was left off that, but even I can't complain.
Do you know what I actually the one I actually preferred was, and I can't remember when it came out, but it was sort of all very early 80s stuff, and it was a remix album. And that was actually quite good.
You Can Dance, I've got that as well.
That was quite a good album.
If anything, for me, it's a bit short, actually. It's like kind of like an extended mega mix more than a full album.
Yeah.
But it's decent, that. But I do like a lot of the extended Madonna remixes from the 1980s anyway. You know, anytime I find a new version, a new mix of Like a Prayer to listen to, I'll always check it out because I just think that's one of the best pop songs of the 80s, really. And certainly it's one of Madonna's best.
I think the thing for me with... I was just going to say, I think the thing for me with her was she was everywhere. She was in your face all the time.
Mm.
And that's what put me off. I got sick of it. It was too much. You know, you couldn't fart without a picture of Madonna coming up on your TV screen or something, you know.
Yeah. No, I understand that, and you know, I suppose if we using the term overrated to mean, you know, what the media and what the press are doing, then I would agree with that. I like her early stuff, and her 80s to late 90s is mine. I'm yet to be persuaded to be collecting anything she's done since music in 2000, really. Even that new remix compilation that she brought out, I thought about buying it, but then I realised there's going to be too much modern crap on it that I'm not going to like. I don't want to know about.
Well, you probably never even heard of it.
I resisted getting that. You know, whether I will change my mind one day or not, I don't know. Chris says if you look objectively at the full catalogue, it's broadly shit. But no, I don't agree. Some of it's not very. I'm Breathless, rubbish. Erotica, mostly pretty bad. Bedtime Stories, I mean, I'm not even really thinking about the Evita soundtrack. I mean, she was just, they could have had anyone on, doing the Evita stuff. I think it was more of a kind of gimmick thing to get Madonna to do that, really, rather than it being...
She was popular. I know.
But, yeah, and Leroy says Glenn Medeiros is overrated. Yeah, I don't think Glenn Medeiros was ever rated by anybody. So
no. Not ever.
Anything else you want to say about Madonna, Jason? Seeing as
that's
really
fine. Yep.
Right. I've got to pick another. See, now I'm struggling because I'm now wanting to pick bands who I just think are rubbish, and I'll struggle to find anything positive to say about them. But I will I will go with one of them. They're a band who I think certainly 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and they're still going now, and I think they still sell, they sell out arenas and things now. Mm-hmm. They've got a big fan base, and they were really big 15 years ago, but everything they've done has just bored the absolute tits off me. Is Muse.
I knew it.
Oh, you were waiting for that one as well, were you? Oh, okay. Well,
no.
I nearly didn't pick him.
No, I wasn't going to pick them.
I can't talk about them too long because I've just deliberately ignored them because like the first album's worth of stuff or the first few singles I just found were so absolutely thoroughly tedious.
Okay.
Muse are just they're like musical. They're like an anesthetic to me. You know what I mean? They're just like you all you have to do is mention the band name, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, okay, my insomnia is cured. Right, I'll see you in the morning, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I do like Muse. I still like them now. I do. Are they overrated? Yeah, maybe.
Does anyone want to job as my co-host? If I'm pulling the right.
I saw Muse. Yeah. I saw Muse as a support band. That's when I first saw them, and they were supporting Skunk Anansie.
Time as a support band, where they were really small.
Who was that?
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Anyway, no. I'm just saying, right? But they supported Skunk Anansie on before Skunk split up for 10 years. They was the last support band they had was Muse, and I went out and I brought Showbiz the very next day because I really loved what they were doing.
What would you categorize their music? Like if you had to put it in some sort of genre, what would you put it in? Because
initially,
for me, it's just dog shit.
I don't know if now they do have a set genre that they're in. They were, I think initially they started off as a sort of a rock band, right? Because obviously quite heavy guitar, bass, and all the rest of it. But now I really don't know. I really don't know. Because they've done all kinds of stuff, haven't they? Really, a lot. Some of them is very synth heavy.
I look at them like I see the pictures in magazines and on websites, and I just instantly just like there's just something about them just turns me off. Like they're so boring.
Again, it's that.
They covered the Nina Simone song and they made that awful. Nina Simone.
I'm sorry, I like that. I like that. I like the original.
I've agreed to disagree. That is one thing where I'll say the original is like 100 times better than their cover. Because, everything they touch just turns to bloody nothingness. That's why I was almost reluctant to even talk about them because
they've
just
fine.
So much. I've just kind of blocked them out. Really, I've just tuned them out.
Fine, yeah. Again, there are another bands you either like them or you don't, right? Are they overrated? Yeah, I would say probably. Right. That's not to say they aren't good. Right. But Skunk Anansie were never overrated.
That's the only trouble flashing these comments up. It means you're going to send Jason off on a tangent.
No, Skunk Anansie were never overrated. Anyway, that's by the by. No, it's just I think I'm secretly a manic depressive and I like depressive music. I don't know.
Is Muse depressive though?
A lot of it can be. Some of it's political.
It always made me feel miserable, but probably not for the right reason.
Yeah. Right. I think I can't remember Blake's bloody name now. Isn't that stupid?
Whoa.
Matt Bellamy. I don't know if he's necessarily the. Sorry.
He's even got a boring name. He barely remembers.
It's an ordinary name. No, I don't think he's the best singer ever. I do think he's a very good guitarist. Right? Is he the best? No. Are there a lot better? Yes. Right? But I think for what they've been trying to do, and I'm not even entirely.
Clapton is considered maybe the greatest guitarist of all time, but most of his stuff, I don't find particularly interesting. For me, it's not about musicianship, really. Like Clapton.
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah. He has his moments.
He's considered to be maybe the greatest guitarist the UK ever produced, but I don't particularly like much of his stuff.
Yeah.
I like a lot of Cream, but I don't particularly like his solo stuff.
No. No, it's that's fair enough. No, I to a certain extent I agree with you. Yes, they got successful too quickly. I think that was the thing. They went from being a relatively unknown band because Showbiz got released twice. They went from relatively unknown band to being, stadium fillers worldwide in a very short space of time, really. And I'm not sure that was of a benefit to them. But no, I still like them. I mean, I haven't brought an album of theirs for a little while, but that's just simply because I haven't brought them. No, not particularly because I dislike them or not. Just haven't brought them. And I should do, really, because I want to see what they sound like. But no, they're just, they're Marmite. You either like them or you don't.
Yeah, but you can't.
I think that's fair enough.
You can't prove my point here, Jason. I'm saying, they're not just overrated to me. They're just boring. And like you're saying, well, I've not bothered listening to their music for years. Well,
no. I said I haven't bought the last few albums. I still listen to them. I've still got the other albums, and I will still put them on.
But if the albums are so good, wouldn't you have bought them?
Yeah.
If you'd have liked the albums enough, well, you would have bought them, surely.
There are other bands I prefer. They're not my favourite band by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
but I do like them. Right?
Well,
that's why I said yes, they are. You can consider them overrated. That doesn't mean that I don't like them. So, just saying.
Yeah.
I appreciate them for what they are and nothing more.
Well, I can't. That's the thing. I don't know what they are apart from like some sort of anesthesia to me.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
Are they meant to be like a bit like a modern Queen? Are they meant to be?
That's the thing. I don't know.
Or arena rock, hard rock, alternative, mainstream. I don't know, and like they've never made me care. One thing about Queen, at least I will say, Queen make me kind of passionate enough to analyse why I dislike a lot of their stuff, and why I'm so against them really throughout a lot of their career. Whereas Muse, I'm kind of like, well, they exist, and I can sort of tune them out because they absolutely dull as fuck for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
If you, perhaps it's because you're not as big a Muse fan as other people, but if someone had said to you, right, sell Jimmy on Muse in the next 10 minutes, then you'd have to go back to him now and say, well, I failed, I couldn't do it because you've not said anything that said to me, oh, you really should at least check their first album out, or you said like, well. Matt Bellamy's alright, but he's better. I've not bought any of their recent albums. I don't really know what they sound like these days. It's like that's not selling Muse to me. Not that I'd expect it to, but so
but they're not my favourite bands.
I nearly didn't mention them simply because I just don't like them. Full stop. I mean, whether they've been I think they have been overrated, but I can't find anything positive to say about them. Like I have positive things to say about Queen, Nirvana, and the grunge scene. Yeah, I can see positives in that. And whoever else I mentioned, I'm sure I said something positive about them. I've got it was because I've got like a goldfish. But Blur, that was it. Yeah, Blur. Some of their singles I really like. Blur, like I said earlier. But Muse, I didn't really want to bring them up until I was struggling because I've just got nothing. I've got no sort of even. I've not even got a passionate hatred for them. I've just like
they're just there.
They just bore me to tears almost.
Yeah. No,
yes,
a lot of people do say that.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people do say that.
About Morrissey in the chat there. Morrissey's with the same idea Madonna has. early great, but continue to bring out dross for decades, trying to remain relevant. I've actually got a couple of more recent Morrissey albums, and you know what? They're all right. They're pretty good. You know, they'll never be on the level of the Smiths, but yeah. So and Morrissey as an actual person is an absolute prick these days. Let's not beat around the bush about it, but music wise, he's still putting out fairly good stuff. Not amazing, but you know, I'm quite enjoying it. So but Jason, have you got probably this might be the last one to mention actually if you've got one. Otherwise, I don't want you to kind of say someone off the top of your head and you don't really mean it.
He's on the top. He's on my list, right? Now, again, right, and you know, respect to the guy, rest in peace, all the rest of it. But someone I think he had a shining moment, right? And that was it. And I don't think he was as good as what other people made him out to be. And that was Meatloaf. Right? He had a couple of strong albums, Bat Out of Hell, and Dead Ringer. They were pretty good, right? And I've got both of those. But most of the rest of his stuff, even Bat Out of Hell too, it was all overblown, right? And if he was doing this Rocky stuff, that wasn't too bad. But when he started getting into his sort of ballady stuff, and he was trying to do this big, boomy, you know, I don't know whether he ever had training for singing or not, but it had that kind of feel to it, as though he'd been in and then someone had taught him how to sing, rather than coming naturally, as it were. Now, you can say that, right? You can level the same thing at Freddie, because Freddie was taught how to sing. And he was, I think he was classically trained. So you could level the same thing at him to a degree, right? But I think
it's referring to Freddie Mercury there, not Freddie out of Rod, Jane and Freddie.
No, they were brilliant. They were awesome.
Oh yeah, favourite band of all time,
though. Yeah, brilliant band. Right, anyway, I preferred Roy anyway. Or whatever his name was, the other bloke. Roger, whatever his name was. Anyway,
he went on to be in El Dorado. You know.
Did he? Oh, blimey! Well, that's just done it.
He played Bunny in El Dorado, and he popped up in EastEnders as well.
Right, we're getting off topic here.
Every day's a school day here at the old Sodcast.
Yeah. No, the thing is with me is that, did he have a good voice? Yes. Right? But it was under them same sort of lines as people like Bonnie Tyler. Right? And I know she worked with Jim Steinman as well. Right?
Well, yeah, they're all in that Steinman stable, aren't they?
Yeah.
Celine Tyler, I think Cher was sort of knocking around there a little bit. More later years,
I don't know if she was with him, but it was that kind of over-the-top voice that you didn't need. And it didn't always sound right for the song that he was doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would do anything, and I won't do love. I won't know anything for love, but I won't do that. That was cheesy as hell. That really was.
I hated that when it came out, but nowadays I quite like it. It has grown on me, weirdly enough. That
no, I still can't stand it. It's up there with bloody Bryan Adams.
Okay,
yeah. I'm just saying, again, a lot of respect for the guy and what he did, and for his time, that 70s, 80s period. Yeah, fine. That suited that, right? But I think him coming back and trying to recreate that magic, it didn't really work for me. and yet loads of people loved it. Did
Well,
he do
yeah,
a
I mean,
Did he do a Bat Out of Hell 3 as well?
That spent about 7 or 8 weeks at number 1, didn't it?
Yeah. But I'm sure he did a Bat Out of Hell 3 as well, and I think that failed miserably.
Oh, I think he did, yeah.
I wouldn't swear to it.
Yeah, I mean, I've not listened to enough Meatloaf over the years to have an opinion on him.
Yeah,
kind of like that overblown, almost like a sort of musical theatre version of rock
yeah,
music,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
That's sort of like, with your arms flailing and your exaggerated gesturing.
Exactly.
And generally, that does instantly turn me off, that kind of thing. But I don't know, Meatloaf. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I would agree to an extent with you, I think. But me personally, I don't overrate him. I don't underrate him. I kind of,
Yeah,
just,
but I think in general,
I like a little tiny bit of his stuff, but generally, it's not my scene really.
Yeah, but a lot of people they said, "Oh, he's an absolute legend," bloody bloody blah, and I don't necessarily know that he was.
No, I don't think he was, to be honest. Not really. He was kind of, the kind of thing he did was all right for kind of your. I remember watching a Wayno's World of Pop's holiday vlog recently, and there was a Meatloaf tribute act at Butlins, and that kind of summed up for me. He sounded like Meatloaf, and like even looked like Meatloaf. He'd done what a lot of us have done over the years and packed on a few pounds. So he kind of
yeah, you're not wrong.
but it was more like, but it just made me think, Meatloaf is like one of those guys who's like, even decades after his death, he's just gonna have people impersonating him at holiday camps. Is that
maybe maybe I should do a Roger Whittaker tribute band?
Well, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, Chris says, he's agreeing that he doesn't deserve the sort of adulation that he's had. I mean, I don't even. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people when he passed away, because it was fairly recently. It was within the last couple of years or so, weren't it? And a lot of people on social media were suddenly crawling out the woodwork as Meatloaf fans. But you get that a lot when a singer or
it happens all the time.
So
yeah.
Like,
well,
as soon as someone famous passes away, you're going to get someone like 2 minutes later on Twitter going, "Oh, I was a big fan of his." Yeah, well, why don't you mention him ever before then?
As I said, I've only got those 2 albums. Did I buy them after he passed? Yeah, but it was a fair time after he passed that I got them. I didn't go, "Oh, I've got to get everything by Meatloaf now." It was like, no, it was 1 or 2 albums. It was secondhand. It was cheap. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll have that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
If I hadn't got it, lose no sleep over it. I don't know.
I mean, if did you enjoy the albums? Is my question.
I did. Yeah. Right. They were good. I mean, again, it's.
So from that, we can surmise he's better than Muse because you actually bothered to buy Meatloaf's albums, and you've not.
Yeah, but I only bought 2. I've got about 7 Muse albums.
7? Have they released that many?
Yeah, I think so. Probably more. Yeah. Well, they've been going nearly.
Imagine listening to them at least 7 times. Blooming egg. I wouldn't be able to get through
you can't listen to them all the time. They're not that kind of band, right? You listen to them at certain times. You go, "Oh, I've not listened to that for a while." You stick it on. You listen to it, right? Then you might not listen to it again for. I've got albums up here. I mean, you see how many CDs I've got, right? There are some of those CDs I've probably not listened to in 10 years, right?
Well, yeah. However,
I still like the albums. I still love the bands. But you've got so much you can't listen to it all, right? It would take me a life to go all through that lot and all the albums I've got on vinyl and tape and all the rest of it. It'd probably take me the rest of my entire life to go through them all, and that's without doing anything else. So,
Okay. Yeah. Well, that sort of generalisation about Jason's CD collection is probably a good place to end. So I think what we can take away from tonight's Sodcast is that, yes, everyone, including the panel, including everyone who's been in the chat and everyone who will watch the replay, can agree that Skunk and Anzi are overrated. Okay, right, we'll see you all next.
Cheers, then.
No. But
only in certain countries.
We have been at it for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah.
And yeah, you didn't think she had that much stamina, did you? But ladies, there ain't any ladies in. Well, hopefully there'll be some watching the replay though, and there might be some who've been watching and just not chatted. If there is, hello, and also goodbye, because we are signing off now. Just want to give another quick reminder that the old Sodcast Eurovision final special will be this coming Saturday. The stream starts at 7:45. Jason's excited for it.
I've never been so excited for a Eurovision Song Contest in about the last 25 years, if not more.
Oh, there we go. So we've achieved something already. So join us for that. We will have the show up on screen in the stream. So if you can't get to the telly, or you can watch it with us on the stream here, and of course join in the chat. We'll all have a laugh. We'll all have a jolly good time. That's going to be 7:45. We're going to be starting the stream ready for Eurovision itself, which will kick off at 8:00 on Saturday. But thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone else who's been chatting. Leroy, Richard McCook earlier, Rob Walker. Thank you to everyone for contributing. Thank you to Jason for hosting alongside. The normal Sodcast will be back in a couple of weeks, but we'll talk more about that perhaps before or after the Eurovision special. But I think I know what we do in 2 weeks' time. But
cool.
I don't want to say too much in case Jason decides he's going on holiday or something, and then it throws his plans out.
No.
But I'll say goodbye. And thank you all again for watching, and we'll see you on Saturday for the live Eurovision watch-along with reactions. So cheers, everybody, and see you in 6 days' time. Goodbye.